Somewhere in a Home Depot parking lot right now, a man is setting his phone alarm for 5:45 a.m. He has a thermos of lukewarm coffee in the cup holder and a folded work shirt hanging from the grab handle in the back. When the sun comes up, he will fold away his wool blanket, brush his teeth using a bottle of generic water, and drive to an office where absolutely nobody knows he just spent the night in the exact same sedan they watched him park the day before. He isn't unemployed. He doesn't struggle with substance abuse. He doesn't have a criminal record or a dramatic backstory of personal ruin. He works 40 hours a week, receives a steady paycheck, pays his taxes on time, and he cannot afford a place to live. If you assume this is a conventional story about people who fell through the cracks of society, stop right there. The demographic this is happening to right now is entirely different from what the standard narrative prepared you for. When most people hear the word homelessness, a very specific, highly visible set of images comes to mind. Tents lined up under a concrete freeway overpass, shelter lines stretching around a downtown block in the freezing rain, or someone standing on a street corner visibly disconnected from the economic grid. That reality exists, and it is a devastating crisis. But it is also the crisis we are already looking at. What is happening in the shadows of our suburban commercial strips is something entirely different. It is quieter, completely sanitized, and deliberately engineered to be invisible. The modern housing emergency isn't just unfolding on urban sidewalks. It is taking place inside late-model SUVs and mid-sized crossovers parked in plain sight at your local Walmart, 24-hour fitness or church parking lot, right next to where you buy your groceries and drop off your kids. And the people living this reality are exhausting every ounce of their daily mental energy to ensure you never notice them. Consider the reality of a 44-year-old logistics coordinator. 2 decades of unbroken employment history, a spotless rental record, and a modest but consistent contribution to a retirement account. He did everything the classic playbook demanded. Then, his apartment complex is acquired by a private equity firm based 3 states away. The units get a superficial facelift, some faux wood flooring and smart thermostats, and the rent instantly spikes by $600 a month. He gets 60 days to comply or vacate. He searches the market, only to find that the entire baseline has shifted. The few remaining affordable units have waitlists that span over a year. To secure a new lease elsewhere, he needs first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. Thousands of dollars up front at a time when his savings are already strained by the rising cost of basic grocery and car insurance. So, he makes a calculated financial decision. He rents a 10x10 storage locker for his mattress and furniture, donates the rest, and moves into the back seat of his car. 2 weeks later, he is sitting in a Tuesday morning staff meeting, reviewing corporate shipping manifests, exchanging casual weekend small talk with his manager. And not a single soul in that room has the slightest clue that he spent the night parked between 2 semi-trucks at a rest stop. Sociologists have given this rapidly expanding demographic a name: the vehicle-dwelling workforce. What makes this group deeply unsettling to economic analysts isn't just that they are unhoused, but that they are fully integrated into the functioning economy. They are data analysts, certified nursing assistants, public school teachers, and retail managers. They have college degrees and clean credit scores. They are the people who keep our cities running during the day. Yet the cities they serve have completely priced them out of the night. To survive this lifestyle without losing your job requires an agonizingly precise daily performance. The first challenge of every morning isn't checking emails or making breakfast. It is locating a public bathroom that opens before dawn. Gas stations, early morning fast food chains, or hospital lobbies become tactical waypoints. Then comes the hygiene routine. Gym memberships are purchased not for the exercise equipment, but strictly for the showers. Clothes must be rotated with mathematical precision, so co-workers never see the same outfit twice in a week. Laundry is scheduled like a military operation. The entire objective of the morning is to cross the threshold of the workplace looking perfectly ordinary, giving no one a reason to ask questions. The stakes of this concealment are incredibly high. This isn't about vanity or avoiding embarrassment. It is about economic survival. If an employer discovers a worker is living out of a vehicle, the immediate assumption is instability. The stigma creates a cascade of risks: potential termination, loss of professional clients, or interventions from child protective services if children are involved. So the performance continues, day in and day out, without a single afternoon off. This brings us to a massive, glaring paradox that points to a systemic failure rather than individual misfortune. The United States possesses the largest economy on Earth, concentration of global wealth, and a tech sector worth trillions. Yet it features a rapidly expanding class of full-time, tax-paying employees who are completely locked out of the basic human need for stable shelter. How did the equation of hard work equaling survival break down so completely? Why is doing everything right no longer enough to keep a roof over your head? The mechanism driving this isn't a sudden catastrophe, but a slow, calculated tightening of an economic vise, a process researchers call the compression effect. To understand how we reach this tipping point, we have to look past the individual cause and look directly at the geographic traps and policy decisions that set this entire crisis in motion. To diagnose how a fully employed workforce ended up sleeping in commercial strips, we have to trace the structural shifts that dismantled the American housing market over the last 40 years. This crisis did not emerge overnight. It is the direct consequence of specific legislative decisions, corporate strategies, and geographic traps that gradually converted housing from a basic social infrastructure into a highly speculative class. The baseline of this transformation began in the late 1970s and accelerated through the 1980s, when federal funding for public housing authorities was systematically reduced. The Department of Housing and Urban Development saw its budget for new affordable housing construction cut by more than 60% during this era. The policy consensus shifted away from direct government construction of housing toward market-based solutions, primarily utilizing tax credits and voucher systems like Section 8. However, housing vouchers were never structured as an entitlement program. Today, only about 1 in 4 households eligible for federal housing assistance actually receives it due to chronic underfunding. The remaining 3/4 are left to compete in the private rental market, where low-end inventory has been vanishing for decades. This supply deficit met a massive structural transformation following the 2008 financial crisis. When millions of single-family homes went into foreclosure, institutional investors, private equity firms, and hedge funds entered the residential real estate market at an unprecedented scale. Backed by billions in low-interest capital, these corporations purchased entire blocks of distressed properties, converted them into rental housing, and institutionalized the management of residential real estate. By utilizing proprietary algorithmic pricing software, corporate landlords began optimizing rental yields across vast portfolios, maximizing profit margins by raising rents universally across specific geographic markets. Data from the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University confirms the scale of this pressure. Over the past decade, median contract rents in major metropolitan areas grew at more than double the rate of inflation, while real wage growth for the bottom 60% of wage earners remained largely flat. In high-demand job centers, the traditional rule of thumb that housing should consume no more than 30% of a household's gross income became mathematically impossible. According to recent federal surveys, over 22 million American households are now classified as rent-burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income for shelter, with an alarming 12 million households classified as severely rent-burdened, spending over 50% of their monthly earnings on rent alone. This financial squeeze is compounded by a rigid geographic trap. The modern knowledge and logistics economy concentrated job growth within specific metropolitan corridors, primarily coastal cities and major inland distribution hubs. Workers must live near these clusters to secure employment in healthcare, education, retail, and transit. However, these identical high-growth regions are governed by restrictive municipal zoning laws. For decades, local governments, pressured by suburban homeowners seeking to protect their property values, implemented strict single-family zoning ordinances, mandatory minimum lot sizes, and lengthy environmental review processes. These regulations effectively criminalized the construction of high-density multifamily housing, townhomes, and affordable apartments in the areas where labor demand was highest. When municipal supply is artificially capped while corporate-driven demand escalates, the price of the remaining inventory rises exponentially. This dynamic created a closed loop. A worker must reside within the metropolitan radius to access a paycheck, but that exact paycheck is insufficient to clear the high financial barrier of local rent. In previous decades, the traditional safety valve for an overextended workforce was geographic migration, moving to cheaper mid-sized cities or rural counties. But between 2015 and 2026, the rise of remote corporate employment and the expansion of national investment portfolios pushed capital into previously affordable secondary markets. Mid-sized cities in the Sun Belt, the Mountain West, and the Rust Belt witnessed identical spikes in housing costs, effectively closing the geographic escape routes for the working class. The financial margin between stability and displacement has consequently shrunk to a razor-thin boundary. When 50% or more of a worker's income goes toward housing, the capacity to accumulate emergency savings disappears. A single external shock, a mandatory vehicle repair, an unexpected medical copay, or a temporary reduction in corporate shift hours disrupts the entire household economy. Because landlords utilize automated eviction filing systems to clear non-paying tenants rapidly, a single missed rent payment can trigger legal proceedings within days. Once an eviction filing enters a tenant's public record, screening algorithms automatically flag the individual as a high-risk applicant, permanently blocking them from qualifying for standard corporate apartment leases in the future. This structural dead end explains why the vehicle became the final safety net for the mobile workforce. The automobile is no longer just a mode of transportation. It functions as a shield against immediate street homelessness and a desperate attempt to retain employment. Moving into a car allows a worker to bypass the upfront costs of security deposits, application fees, and credit checks that dictate the modern rental market. By maintaining their vehicle, keeping their phone active, and continuing to report to their shifts, these workers attempt to weather the economic storm in plain sight. They are trapped in a geographic paradox. They are essential to the daily operation of the municipal economy, yet they are completely locked out of the legal right to occupy physical space within it once their shift concludes. The intersection of full-time employment and housing instability has created an intense, escalating conflict between municipal authorities, corporate employers, and the vehicle-dwelling population. As corporate parking lots and suburban side streets fill with mobile workers overnight, local governments are responding not with expanded infrastructure, but with aggressive legal and architectural deterrence. This ongoing confrontation highlights a deep systemic contradiction. The very cities that depend on low and middle-wage labor are increasingly deploying police resources to criminalize the survival mechanisms of that same workforce. Over the past 3 years, municipal councils across California, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado have significantly expanded the enforcement of vehicular vagrancy ordinances. These laws, often designated as oversized vehicle bans or nighttime parking restrictions, explicitly prohibit individuals from sleeping inside passenger cars between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. on public right-of-ways. To bypass federal court rulings that restrict cities from criminalizing sleeping on public property when no shelter beds are available, municipalities are utilizing parking enforcement mechanisms. Instead of arresting individuals, parking enforcement officers issue civil citations, tow warnings, and escalating fines. For a worker living in a car, a single $300 citation can completely wipe out their weekly grocery budget, and an impounded vehicle results in the immediate loss of both their shelter and their means of getting to work. To understand the scale of this daily pressure, one must look at the specific enforcement data from cities like Los Angeles and San Diego. Municipal records show a marked increase in the issuance of non-traffic citations in commercial zones adjacent to major retail hubs. Local business coalitions frequently pressure police departments to clear these areas, citing concerns over property values, customer perception, and sanitation. The response from corporate landowners has been equally unyielding. Major big-box retailers, which historically maintained informal corporate policies allowing overnight parking for travelers and recreational vehicles, have systematically altered their stance. Private security firms are hired to patrol commercial plazas overnight, utilizing dashboard cameras and automatic license plate readers to tag and eject vehicle dwellers within minutes of arrival. This zero-tolerance environment forces vehicle dwellers into a complex, high-stress game of geographic evasion. Workers must constantly identify new parking locations to avoid drawing the attention of law enforcement or private security. The criteria for a viable overnight parking space are unforgiving. It must be level to allow for sleeping, sufficiently dark to obscure the occupants, and close enough to the workplace to conserve expensive gasoline. Yet, it must not be so isolated that the vehicle becomes a target for break-ins or property crime. The daily search for safety creates chronic sleep deprivation, which directly degrades a worker's performance during their daytime shifts. In response to this expanding crisis, a handful of non-profit organizations and progressive municipalities have established safe parking programs. These initiatives convert secured municipal lots, church properties, or community center parking structures into designated overnight locations for vehicle dwellers. The lots provide portable toilets, trash disposal, security personnel, and basic social services. However, demand for these spaces drastically outstrips supply. In cities where thousands of individuals are estimated to be living in vehicles, safe parking lots often offer fewer than 100 total spaces. Furthermore, these programs enforce strict intake rules. Vehicles must be registered, operational, and insured, and occupants must arrive after 7 p.m. and vacate the premises by 7 a.m. For workers operating on irregular night shifts or early morning schedules, these rigid operational windows are incompatible with keeping a job. The tension extends directly into the workplace itself. HR departments are increasingly encountering cases where employees use the corporate office address for mail delivery, tax forms, and healthcare enrollment. Because human resource software automatically flags duplicate addresses or commercial post office boxes, management frequently discovers the housing status of their staff. While some corporate entities offer employee assistance funds, many view housing instability as a liability. The prevailing corporate fear centers on workplace productivity, reliability, and hygiene standards. Workers report a constant state of paranoia, fearing that an unexpected inspection of their vehicle's back seat by a colleague or a rumor circulating in the break room will terminate their employment. The crisis has reached a dead end where the traditional economic incentives are broken. The vehicle-dwelling workforce is caught in a closed loop. They are earning too much to qualify for traditional heavily rationed government welfare programs or low-income housing subsidies, which prioritize families with zero income or individuals with severe disabilities. At the same time, they are earning far too little to clear the arbitrary financial benchmarks set by corporate landlords who routinely demand that an applicant's gross monthly income equal at least 3 times the cost of market rate rent. This leaves a massive demographic of functional, productive citizens entirely stranded in the gap between state assistance and market reality.